exposed to and given a copy of the bullying harassment policies. We don't want to make anybody unaware of the policy. It needs to be on your website. It needs to be on your school district website. It needs to be sent home to the parents. This is I apologize for the slide. I put too much stuff in there, but I'm suggesting that this policy can be done and given out to, during student assemblies, during faculty meetings, open PTA meetings, any kind of student group meetings that you have during the first couple of weeks. It needs to be constantly called to the attention of all of our stakeholders that these policies are in place and we're going to enforce them. I think far too often when we get into the first 3 to 4 days of school before the kids come in here, teachers are inundated with all kinds of meetings and stuff like that when they really need to be in their own classrooms working whatever they need to do to prepare for the kids. But at the top of my list would be, as a school administrator, to get after this whole issue about making sure that everybody feels comfortable and safe in their environment, which includes that bullying, harassment policies that they have. They need to have these updated annually. You can't do what I call a Calipari, beloved Calipari one and done thing here. So I said that for the UK fans. Yeah. You can't do a one and done with, telling your staff members at the beginning of the year in August, it's the 7th, okay, thou shalt not have bullies in our school, go on. This needs to be something that continues to happen every year and throughout the year. The kids need to know how to file reports of this. It can come in face-to-face. It could come in through the old Dropbox thing or the online way, whatever. And they need to know that we are not going to stand for this. We need to send home a copy of all these policies to the parents. Yeah, and I would send it home by mail. If you give it to them, the policies will be on the floor of the bus or wherever they come into. I want to see that policy goes home to the parents. We send it to every parent. Cost, I understand that. But the bottom line here is that you want to saturate your community with these policies that are there to be sure that they at least are confronted with it. I mentioned a minute ago that we need to tell the kids how to report bullying and where they can go and to whom it needs to be reported to. When we do our assessments around the state, we'll ask these questions. Kids, if you're being bullied, would you know where to go? And about 20 to 30% of them have no idea. So we need to have the principals and the teachers saying, if you're being bullied, here are your options to get this information to us. The multiple conduits, the telephone, the face-to-face, the online, yada, yada, yada. Alternative ways of reporting. Be sure that you have different ways of getting these things out. Years ago, the drop boxes were seen okay. They also had, I believe, the after-hour tip line on the phones. Well, kids tell us, well, they can recognize our voice. Mm-hmm. So they shied away from that. But that get back to what Zach was saying earlier here. We need to provide, since these kids live in the online world, so to speak, like I said, the virtual world there, that's our logo of our stop tip line that we have with the Center for School Safety. And I emphasize the last two words of that parenthetical clause there that says no cost to the districts. So any behaviors you can see, bullying, violence, risky behaviors, those can all be reported anonymously through this. And what this does is this kicks in an email to whomever the district wishes the email to be received by. Mm-hmm. So it could be principals, counselors, safe schools coordinators, school psychologists, whatever the case may be. Make sure that they have a redundancy that if one doesn't get it, another one will. And that's just one of many programs that are out there that could help out, have alternative ways to get this reported. And that's a frustration principals have, is that oftentimes we do not know that a kid's being bullied unless it's reported to us. And then we can jump in and do what we hope to address those issues. I say advertise, advertise. You need to have not only that assembly, talk to the kids, have the policies out there, things like that, but you also need to have let your walls read well too. Break the code of silence, no bullying, stop the bullying, have that saturated around the building. Local businesses, I go back to Danville for a few minutes ago, not a few minutes ago, several years ago. Their Chamber of Commerce has jumped in with the Danville Independent School District, and they were putting, if I said tent messages, those little tents that you can put on your tables at the restaurants. Mm-hmm. Danville Community Schools join the school system with combating bullying. Be sure you say the right things at home and teach your kids well, blah, 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 blah. Mm. Chamber of Commerce can be a major help like that, passing out literature, like I said here a minute ago, about we're not going to tolerate this. I did speak to the faith community one time, and again, I got a little bit full of myself. And I said, how many of you all preached a sermon on bullying, thou shalt not bully? And they all kind of had a sheepish look on their face. I said, well, why not? You know, the Bible talks about treating one another as you want to be treated. Why not address this community? Why not address this with your congregations and talk about this a little bit? And so several of them did, and they called my attention to it when they did it, but I thought it was good that they did that. So businesses and churches, and you mentioned stakeholders, they can be a major player in this thing for that 85% of the time that the schools do not have them. Parent involvement, this is the biggie right here. And I go back to this point I made earlier, that 80% of the bullying that we find out come in some form or fashion through social networks or online issues. And we are reliant on the victims and or the parents to report this to us. So if we don't know what we don't know, then we can't jump in and try to help out as, you know, the best that we can. And so the non-electronic bullying that takes place, kids don't bully in front of me. They'll bully it behind my back. They'll bully it behind the teacher's back. So we're trying to find out ways, like Zach was saying a minute ago, to get some way to get information to us. And so maybe this online tip line would be the best way to go.
Another thing that I think is interesting that I actually had a student just inform me about is that there's also intergenerational bullying, where parents, right, are having some stress and they come home, and the way that now they're parenting their child in a way that creates this type of acting out behavior at school. So even thinking about parent involvement, being able to, even if you have parent workshops or things like that, the parents can come to and talk to them about bullying, talk to them about even some of their stressors, ways that they can kind of calm down, meditation, progressive relaxation, muscle relaxation, because oftentimes it may be a stressful household that can also contribute to some of these bullying behaviors that happen at school. So as you're involving parents, you know, if you can, I know sometimes it's hard to get parents in, trying to give them some tools for their toolkit to help them manage within their household.
And that's very important. That's very important. Bullying, like I said, again, is a community problem. And we need to be sure, just like you were saying, that we need to have strategies to help out. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but parents need to monitor their kids' activities on the internet and social networks. I shared my point about that earlier about this, but I think they need to do it at least once a week if they want to be a part of the solution. I think that sometimes some parents, and they've confessed to me that they want to be the friends and not so much the parent of the kid. Well, I don't want the kid not to like me, you know, and I go back to my old parents who said that I'm not into this for a popularity contest. I'm your dad, I'm your mom, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do. I know more about being young than you know about being old. And so therefore, I think the parents I shouldn't put it that way. I said parents, I think, should be the role models for the kids as far as a positive role model is concerned. Consider meeting. Now, this is a controversial one, but I've seen it work in some of the school districts around the state. You have some kids that have a history of bullying. So these teachers called those kids in who have been bullies in the past and talked to the parents at the beginning of the school year saying, we want to have a positive year this year. Here are some activities that your kid was involved with last year. Let's see if there's anything we can do both at the home front and at the school to try to avoid these things from happening again this year. And again, that's very controversial. What do you mean? You call my kid in and saying what he did last year is going to be held against him this year? But in some cases, the parents are saying, thank you so much for calling us in. We'll work together with you on that. So these are suggestions, for consideration out there.
I think you have to meet a parent where they are, though, in any situation.
Yes.
If a parent is having trouble making ends meet financially at home, their kid bullying may not be the biggest priority right then. Yeah. So, you can't start off with bringing them into school in that situation, right? Like, you got to meet the parent where they are and be willing to start there. Sometimes as school personnel, we want to address it, we want to remedy it, we want to get it done. But in all actuality, if a parent can't put food on the table, that's what they're more worried about. So we got to meet the parent where they are and help them get to the place where we need them to be.
And I hear what you're saying, and I've dealt with parents who are in those categories obviously for years and stuff like that. But sometimes they were saying, gee whiz, I wish you would have given me a heads up on this earlier so you didn't have to call me in off my job to take care of this suspension here and there. So that's left to the audience to make their decision on that type of thing. Here's something that I thought was really neat, that kids listen to other kids. And so Lafayette High School did a really good job, and I should have, if I thought ahead of time, I would have put in the video on this thing. Lafayette did a really good job with their television class on a bullying message that the kids made out, and they also did an advertisement about the stop tip line, whatever, but they were saying everybody has a right to be at Lafayette, and we know bullying occurs here, and it's up to us to try to help those who are being bullied and get this out of our school, et cetera. But it was a PSA, public service announcement, that the kids made and ran on their video announcements every so often, which they felt had a really, really good impact as far as limiting, I should say eliminating, but limiting and reducing the number of bullying things that are going on. But there are PSAs out there that you can download to the school officials that if you want to put them on your video announcements in the morning, you can get a whole bunch of PSA announcements that are 30 seconds long about bullying issues. And then again, I was talking a few minutes ago about have students create their own PSAs and broadcast them, because a lot of schools have student-oriented morning announcements, and I think it's good for them to be looking at that as well. External PR campaigns, Channel BLK, Jack Patty's group has always been very good about running PSAs, especially during School Safety Week and bullying-free community messages, things like this. So no matter where you are across the state, hit your local radio stations and television stations to help you with that. This is a Snapchat of our, not a Snapchat, a snapshot, a Snapchat on the brain today, of our website. And this is a whole page that deals with bullying issues that has a bunch of suggestions that parents can use, teachers can use when it comes to trying to prevent bullying and address bullying issues in their homes and in their classrooms. Document and advertise. If I'm talking too fast, butt in here. Document all efforts being made to prevent and curb bullying. I think I went through a litany of things that schools can, try to do to try to get that message out and keep it a consistent message throughout the entire school year. Publicize your school district efforts through your PTA newsletter, your newspapers. I'm having a paper from Knox County come up to me on Monday talking about bullying issues and what prevention things that we can do. So they're taking a very proactive way at this, television, radio, et cetera. I mentioned that again. But this is a community problem. And the schools want to be a strong partner in this. I'm not saying we don't want to, but we all need to work together to try to stem the tide on this issue here. And like I said, it's our #1 problem in our state. So please remember, bullying is everyone's problem. And then we get into, this is that village thing I mentioned a few minutes ago, that it's going to take us all to really effectively address this. Time for question, comments?
I have, as things have changed, like the stranger danger has changed now, and the way that we're training and that kind of stuff, I think the same thing with bullying has shifted a little bit. It's always been emphasis on the people that were getting picked upon, but now I've seen some training, and I don't know if you all have anything about the bullies. And
yes,
about
bullies as victims.
Made these huge monsters that are terrorizing everybody, but yet we've started to shift. Are there training out there that we can look at? Because I think we need to look at why they're doing bullying and helping that person, because they're a victim too.
Right. Did you want to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, there are specific programs that we can look at from systemic levels of how to address the bully themselves, because oftentimes the kid who is bullied then becomes a bully. You see the victim as a bully, and it becomes a cycle that you go through. There's specific programs within a school that you can start from. Olveus bullying program is one. Something PBIS, positive behavior intervention and supports. There are specific programs within each of those. The CHAMPS program. There's a lot of stuff that's through there that your school system could know about and should know about, that they can work if bullying becomes a systemic thing within your school and you know that it's a concern that's there. There are absolutely programs that will work through that.
Sometimes the restorative practices program will work on this, and sometimes it won't, when you bring the bully and the victim together and try to negotiate a peaceful settlement like that. And it's also a very what's I want to say, delicate thing if you try to bring the parents in and try to deal with that. So it's going to take some really strong practices to work those things out. But bottom line here is like what Zach was saying, you have some good programs out there, and we see that the positive behavior interventions program as being probably one of the better ones, because it has a whole civility component to that helps out. But again, I think it goes back to the role models of the parents, the role models of the teachers, and the culture of the school to see what we can do to try to address some of these things, and trying to tell parents, be aware of what your kids are doing and try to help us at the 85% level I was talking about there would help us a little bit more in the schools too.
Do you have any questions from our online community?
I've encouraged the online participants to ask questions, but we haven't got any yet. We do have one. This has been an excellent presentation. Will it be available later? The answer is yes, it will be available later. It's being recorded. It will be on the Human Development Institute's website.
And Netflix.
There's also another program, I think it's called the Kiva, K-I-V-A program, that's more for bystanders. So creating more empathy for,
Green dot.
yeah.
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, creating more empathy around for the bystanders to report the bullying instead of, like we were talking about before, pulling out their phones and, you know, recording the incidents and posting them on social media, but rather to have more empathy for the victims there.
Yeah, and that Green Dot program you mentioned obviously was for sexual harassment and abuse and things like that, but spills right over into the bullying issue. Very good.
Yeah.
We still don't have any questions online yet.
Okay.
We have one over here.
Mr. Akers, you mentioned the resiliency screener.
Yes.
Is that available somewhere? I would like to investigate.
Can you help me with that, Zach, as far as resiliency screeners are concerned? Okay, you can. There's a group called Terrace Metrics, T-R-T-E-R-R-A-C-E, Metrics. They're a group out of northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, and they are in Campbell County, Erlanger, Fort Thomas, maybe Kenton County, and over Carroll County. They have a screener where the kids take this survey basically, and it's about an hour-long survey, and it gives them that information that you're talking about. When I was talking with the gentleman that works with us on the school safety work group, Joe Barjone, he said that there are many resiliency screeners out there that are free. And what I can do for you is obviously give you my email address and things like this, and then I can get those people to get in contact with you and give you websites where you can get those for free. The Terrace Metrics program costs $6 a kid per district, and they have basically a good follow-up service that comes around with this, that giving suggestions to parents and to teachers on how to deal with these issues that might be manifesting from this resiliency survey. One of the things that we're doing with the school safety work group is looking at the mental health issue that we think as far as any kind of violent behavior is concerned in schools. Of course, that's kind of the one where everybody's looking at right now in our state. And we're advocating from our shop, looking at schools seriously considering doing resiliency screening during the first after the first 30 days of school, give the kids 30 days to get used to school. Then after that, on kids who are showing that they have some risky behaviors and issues, to have a student assistance team, which can be defined in that school as a school psychologist, a teacher, to a counselor, principal, to get together and run them through a threat assessment tool and see if that manifests something that's a little bit more severe, and then refer it to a mental health care professional. So we're going to serve as a triage unit, so to speak, on kids that are manifesting these behaviors, but we're not going to wait for them to misbehave. We're going to try to get ahead of the curve by the resiliency screeners and then following up with the student assistance team threat assessment.
And here, there is a screener. I'm not sure if it's the resiliency screener, but it does assess mental health. I'm not sure if it has any questions on there about bullying. It may. It's called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, the SDQ. It's free online, and it's in probably 50 different languages, and they tell you what the cutoff scores are for kids. So I know that that's one screener, but I'm not sure. Have you heard of it? I'm not sure exactly what all the questions are, but definitely check that one out. Yeah.
We have a question online.
All right.
The question is from Sean, and the question is, have middle school dress codes ever proved to be effective in curbing behaviors?
No. They're next to impossible to enforce, and you get in and you get into all kinds of issues. Now, if you go to Catholic schools, they have the uniform issues and stuff like that, but the dress code things by and large are very difficult to enforce. As a principal, you're always talking with parents, well, I can't afford this, I can't get this, I can't get that, whatever the case may be. Now, you can have dress codes that are within reason. You don't want to wear any shirts that are going to, insult somebody, or any, vulgar behavior and things like this. But then you get into, well, how short are the shorts, or things like this, and that gets to be a real issue out there. And so parents ought to have the dress code. Parents ought to send their kids to school dressed appropriately. So it's not going to be offensive to anybody. And I'm not just talking about the length of the dresses and skirts and stuff like that. I'm talking about kids wear shirts all the time with sayings on them, and some are very cruel. And so, but from my shop, I've seen schools who tried to do this several years ago, and they've abandoned it. They're just saying, let's be more reasonable in our dress, and they've lifted the uniform code. Good question.
You had mentioned earlier about the increased frequency of students dropping out of school because of bullying. With the changes in the legal dropout age, legal dropout age moving to 18, what do you see the ramifications of that being? Because I mean, I can see, it's not like you want anybody to drop out, but at the same time, if you have someone that's in a really hostile environment and they don't have the option to drop out, I can see that being a problem too.
Absolutely.
As well as going to homeschool, maybe that's their alternative for dropping out. Do you have any thoughts on that situation?
I see that all the time. I started in the school 6 years ago. The legal age was 16 when kids could drop out. It's changed in the last 2-3 years to become 18. And so students now, you see people that are a 10th grader for the 3rd year in a row because they're not getting their credits because they're not motivated to do well. And it's only increasing the issues that are there. Then they become truant and they get involved in other legal issues as well. In some situations, it's very helpful to have increased the dropout age. In some situations, like when a kid is perpetually bullied or tormented and don't feel like anything is happening and it's impacting their mental health, it can be a negative thing. What we end up doing is oftentimes referring for alternative school or alternative programs where that kid gets in a different educational environment where they can feel safer and more comfortable. That's typically the route that we go the most in that. Change the kid's setting as much as you can so that way they can make them feel more comfortable.
And truancy is skyrocketing after they published that, or after they passed that law. That Senate Bill 200, which was going after status offenders, which would be truancies and out of control issues and stuff like that. They've developed a system called a FAIR team, where they have one educator on there and probably maybe 5 or 6 or 7 other community service related child serving agencies on there. And so a kid can be dubbed truant by the end of September, might have to go through some kind of diversion. And he says, oh yeah, I'll do better like that. Then he's back in again in November and December. And then, so it's 3 or 4 strikes before you get to go before a judge. Whereas before, if a kid starts showing being habitually truant, they went to a judge early on. And the judge would, tell them to the parents, okay, let's get these kids in school. And if he doesn't like what's going on in the school, let's go to the alternative program. Let's go home. Let's go whatever. But they call their hand on it early on. But now sometimes it's not even until March before a kid sees a judge on this thing. And as a result, the cat's out of the barn already. And you just can't recap 3/4 of the school year there. So that gets to be an issue. And so I think that if we can get zeroing in on what the problem is, if it's the bullying thing that you're talking about right there, then let's address that head on, because the kid's not a discipline problem. The kid's a victim. So what can we do to keep the kid in school? And so it might be the homeschool, it might be the alternative school, or it might be moving the perpetrator out to a different schedule. Sometimes I think too often we make the victims have to change their schedule, and the bad guys, if you will, get to stay on. Well, maybe we need to mess with those schedules a little bit more and let the kid who's the victim here stay where he needs to be or she needs to be.
If you guys have additional questions beyond right now, I think we're over on time. But if Mr. Akers, you have your email address, I think, over here.
There you go.
That'll be helpful for the Center for School Safety for anyone to be able to go to. But then Dr. Fisher and I can be reached to if necessary as well. Yeah. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Oh, did you? I wanted to tell you. Did you see that instance of the kid, the father whose kid was being bullied, and so he went and talked to the bully,